Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Seat of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's album study night once again. Let me introduce the crew before we introduce the album. Chad Hutchinson's in the house. Ken Golden's here. Professor of Prog. Anthony Ferrara's here. I'm Indy. And Eric Porter's also here as well. Greetings, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Hey.
So this is Anthony's week, and this is Anthony's album today. So he will be running the show tonight. The album study is going to be this bad boy right here, Obscured by Clouds by Pink Floyd, the album that preceded The Dark Side of the Moon. The Floyd had to take the journey to the moon going through the clouds. So Anthony is going to drive this episode, and I'll turn it over to you, my friend. Tell us a little bit about this
album. All right,
album.
I'm going to try to do all this without screwing anything up. I chose this album because I think it's one of my favorite Floyd records. I think it's very underrated. I think a lot of people don't talk. I think it's one of those albums that's not talked a lot about when you talk about Floyd. They talk about Metal. They talk about Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Animals in the Wall, and then they talk about the Final Cut, but not for good reasons. We all know that. except for Louise. Louise loves the Final Cut. Obscured by Clouds was released in 1972 in June of 1972, kind of in between when they started the sessions for Dark Side, and they were still doing a Japan tour. They were commissioned by a French filmmaker, Schroeder, who Pink Floyd had done two previous soundtracks for with More and Zabriskie Point. So they were successful, so he thought he'd get the band in again. Obscured by Clouds released in 72, a little bit different from the two previous releases where Metal and Atom Heart Mother had an epic track. Obscured by Clouds was basically kind of an album composed of 10 tracks, 3 or 4 instrumentals, and basically kind of like a more mellower side that they were doing on Metal, like Pill of Winds and Saint-Tropez. So that's why I picked it. It's one of my favorites. So I guess I'll start it off, and I'm going to go with Ken. What do you like about the record, Ken?
Nothing. Yeah. Anthony, you're not going to like me very much.
He doesn't like you very much anyway, Ken.
It's true. We can't go much further down. To me, I mean, the record was conceived as a soundtrack, so maybe as a soundtrack it works, but it's just there's no development on any of the tracks. I mean, I went through it a few times. There's a reason. I mean, this has been in my collection for like 40 years, and when I put it on, I barely remembered it, and what I remembered about it wasn't very good. I mean, they're just ideas, they're germs of ideas. There's no real development of any songs, and that's why I say within the context of a film, it might work. But to me, this is an album like they should get the guys from Kansas to like take it out in back of the barn and put it out of its misery. So it's just. I'll give you my rundown. It starts.
Well, one thing I probably figured you would be like, what are they doing this for? Is you have the track "Burning Bridges" and then you have the track "Mudman," which is basically the instrumental passage to "Burning Bridges." They could have just kept the songs together and had maybe an extended instrumental piece. I thought was kind of odd.
Here's my rundown. I went through Obscured by Clouds, the opening track, some nice Gilmour guitar, but it doesn't really develop into anything. When You're In, it's a good riff that they beat to death, but again, there's no development. It doesn't blossom into a song. Burning Bridges, finally something that resembles Pink Floyd. Richard Wright's up front and typical dreamy guitar, vocals. Then Wright comes in, some nice guitar, and you could tell this was a track written by Wright. It sounds like a Richard Wright track.
Oh yeah.
The gold that's in the Gilmour rocks out. A little bit of the Barrett era creeps through. What's in the Deal? Could have been an outtake from Metal. And you could say that about a lot of this stuff. A lot of this is like, to me, is kind of like leftovers from Metal and nothing that really developed into Dark Side of the Moon. I wrote here Mudmen. You could hear the germs of ideas that would pop up on Dark Side. Best track so far. Childhood's End, Gilmour all the way, and pretty good track. Free 4 annoying Water song until Gilmore's solo kicks in elevating the tune to mediocre. Stay, another tune that sounds like a leftover from Metal, actually not bad. Absolutely Curtains, probably the most Floydian thing on the album, doesn't make it good. It just, there's no, it's not songs. It's just like, it's almost like they were jotting down ideas. If I understand correctly, they recorded the album in like a couple of days, I think. Something like 2, yeah. So, and that's what it sounds like. It's the guys going into the studio, cooking up some stuff that maybe would be the foundation of tracks further on down the line. But there's not one standout track on this album. I mean, forget it doesn't have to be a 20-minute sidelong piece. I mean, that's great when they do that. But they had a lot of, One of These Days is one of the best tracks. How long was that, So there's nothing on that level. There's nothing. I didn't even think there was anything on this album that was as good as the worst song on Metal.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I'm. Like I said, I went back and you guys.
You think you're gonna tell me you think what's the song about the dog? You think that's a good song on Metal?
Famous.
All right, maybe that one's not so good.
I love the dog. Love the
The thing is, I'm a Pink Floyd fan. I love Pink Floyd. Everything Through the Wall. So for me to be hating on this album, it's because it deserves it. It's just not a good album. Not as presented, not for what it is. If you're in the discography, if you're putting this, up against Metal or Dark Side of the Moon, or I don't care, pick the album you don't like. I mean, all right, it's probably better than the Final Cut, but that's a Roger Waters solo album, as far as I'm concerned. It's just not a good album. This is not an album I will ever go back to. I hadn't heard it in decades, and I just, it'll be, they'll bury me with this one, I guess. I don't know, because I'm not going to listen to it. I could tell Eric agrees with me. I could tell.
I'm gonna go to my good friend Eric to see what his thoughts on this record are.
I think Ken read me like a book. I feel like a lot of it, but Anthony, I think the thing with this is when I listened to it and I read about it, because I don't know that I've ever gone back and read it. And like Ken said, I think you're thinking of it in terms of a Floyd record when it was done as a soundtrack. And it does sound to me like demos or ideas that aren't fully fleshed out. I like What's the Deal, Childhood's End are decent. But I guess I think Ken really said it well. That it just feels like a lot of ideas. There's good sections. There's some nice Gilmore stuff, some nice guitar playing. And I got to admit, as much as I like Floyd, I'm a Floyd homer, I think, in that I listen to this. It doesn't even sound like the same band as Dark Side of the Moon. And I know the intent.
Do you guys feel the same way about the album More?
I haven't listened to More probably in 30 years.
Ken, do you feel the same way about More?
Honestly, I don't even have any recollection of More. Yeah.
But
I'll answer that on my turn, Anthony.
Okay.
And it's one thing, Anthony, I will say it was a very inspired pick. When you said you were going to do this, I was like, wow, that like out of left field, and I thought it was a really good pick. And it was, I enjoy the fact that I had to go back and kind of like relearn this piece of shit. But but yeah, I mean, it was cool that you picked it. I mean, like, Metal would have been the softball, you know what I mean? In any of those albums. This was harder.
Well, I picked it because it's been one of my favorites for years, and not a lot of people talk about it.
No.
For good reason.
That's why I picked it. So, Eric, are you still commenting?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's hard again because the intent of this, like you said, it was recorded very quickly. I think when I read about it a little bit, they were watching scenes and trying to put a little music together. But I mean,
the movies, I guess, is pretty bad too.
you listen to Dark Side of the Moon, which is what, and like you said, they were writing those tunes while this was being recorded. They'd already kind of started fleshing out Dark Side of the Moon. I'm like, it's not even. it's not even comparable to Dark Side.
Well, that's obviously not, it's not the same producer either.
But I mean, even song wise, but again, it's just that intent. It's almost like it's not, it's hard to listen to this as in the studio stuff because the intent of this was as a soundtrack. So I guess I'll throw my hat so I can shut up and everyone else can talk. I'm with Ken on it. It
All right, Pete, give me some love.
Before I go, Louis Nasser's in the house. What's up, Louis?
Sorry,
Okay.
Hey, Louis.
sorry.
Glad
Hey,
to have you.
brother.
We were hoping you'd show up.
I was here. I was just working on stuff that I have to go record later. So I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. That's okay.
We were talking about your love for the final cut.
That is a piece of masterful work, unlike this piece of shit. But do go on.
All right, so I actually like this album, but I like it for what it is. This is not to me, not a masterful Pink Floyd studio album. This is a soundtrack of different ideas. And as I'm not a big soundtrack guy, but as a soundtrack, I think this works pretty well. I've never seen the film, don't really have any interest in seeing the film. But I do like a good chunk of the compositions on here. And I will agree with Eric and Ken that some of this stuff sounds like kind of work in progress or pieces of this and pieces of that. But in the hands of these guys, these little pieces of things I think sound pretty good. I like the title track, a great Gilmore guitar on there. It's just kind of this cool, spooky, haunting thing. Would I have liked it to have been a little more realized? Yeah, for sure. I like When You're In. I think that's a good rocker. More great guitar work on here. A lot of swirling organ. I like that they start off the album with two really kind of cool instrumentals. Burning Bridges, I think, is really good. I like the trading off between Rick and David's vocals. The organ is kind of creepy. It's got some cool acoustic guitar. It's kind of psych, kind of prog. It reminds me of the early stuff. I kind of dig that. The gold that's in the wherever it's supposed to be in the hills or whatever, another rocker. Sounds like the James Gang to me, which, doesn't sound like Floyd, but I like the James Gang. I don't mind that. What's the Deal? I don't really care for that too much. That's not very good. Mudmen, I think, is cool. Another cool instrumental. I think Childhood's End is terrific. Probably my favorite song on here. That to me could have been on Metal. Sounds like it could have been a leftover from Wish You Were Here. I like that a lot. And to go back to the whole Metal comparison, I love the bookends of Metal. Everything in between, I don't care much for. I like some of these songs better than those couple of songs in the middle of Metal. That's just my opinion. Free For, it's the only one that Roger sings on the album. It's not that inspiring. It's like they're trying to do a Beatles thing. It doesn't really work for me. Stay is really good. Another Rick Wright song. I like Absolutely Curtains. I think it's kind of cool, psychedelic, reminds me of like the Omagoma stuff in a weird way. I don't mind this album. I think it's, is it an absolute classic? No, but I think it's way better than the other soundtrack we were talking about before, which has maybe 2 or 3 songs that interest me and the rest is kind of like forgettable. I think this works pretty well. There's plenty of Floydisms on this album. Yes, there's not a lot of fully fleshed out songs, but I think the playing is great. There's enough here to keep my interest. So I actually like it. If I were to rate this, it's probably a solid 3 out of 5 star album. Maybe 3.5 because it's a couple of songs I like a lot. But it's no Wish You Were Here, it's no Animals, it's no Dark Side for sure. But as a cool little curiosity in their catalog, I like it. So thumbs up for me.
All right.
What's interesting though is I'm listening to what you're saying, Pete, and I'm comparing it to my comments track by track. We almost matched up. The tracks
You
that I
didn't like
thought-
Stay.
the tracks that you like are the tracks that I like.
Yeah.
And the tracks that you thought were like kind of meh, were the tracks that I thought were kind of meh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but Ken, you said Stay was a terrible song. It's a great tune.
I like
I
Stay.
said I wrote another tune that sounds like a leftover from Metal, actually not bad.
Oh, okay.
Out of the 10 songs, I think for me, like at least 6 are pretty enjoyable. The others, I don't really have much,
Free For is a little goofy.
Yeah, I don't really like
Free
it.
For is kind of like the Saint-Tropez of the record.
Yeah, it to me it just sounds,
It's
it's weird how
silly
that's
sing-along.
the only Roger vocal on the album is that one, right? It's kind of strange. And I mean, there's a lot of Gilmore vocals on this album, and there's a lot of good guitar playing on this album, I think. So it's kind of
Oh yeah, he's got some pretty killer passages, especially Childhood End. That song just jams.
yeah, no, I like that one quite a bit. That's good.
All right, Luis, hammer me.
I don't intend to hammer you because you didn't have anything to do with this record. You just picked it.
Yeah, it was
That
only
is true.
two.
That is true.
I think Pink Floyd. I am with Eric. I think Pink Floyd has three clear eras. They have the Syd Barrett era, which was a very psychedelic, very experimental band with a particular direction. Then Syd Barrett kind of lost the plot, as we all know. They brought in Dave Gilmour. Dave Gilmour is to me a controversial figure because I think he has played what are undeniably some of the best guitar solos in rock. But he's also, and you know, the last 20 years at least prove it, he's a guy with a whole bunch of nothing to say. So he's a great side guy, but that's it. And then that era, which culminates with metal, has some great ideas, and you can see that echoes, and that's where they're going, right? But a lot of it is just, we don't know who we are. Are we psychedelic? Are we high? Are we playing this little weepy thing? And I find that, to me, this record, a lot of it does sound like a demo. It sounds like stuff that wasn't intended to be songs, but then they decided that they needed an album. Why not put it out? I agree with Pete. I think that Obscured by Clouds is very promising as it begins, but then it really goes nowhere. It's more like, you know, this is an album that you really have to be really stoned to appreciate. And I don't like that. I think that music is best when you can appreciate it in a variety of states. And I'm not knocking being stoned. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm just saying that if I don't have a lot of help, I'm not going to reach for it. And it has the other defect that I don't like with that era of Floyd, which is that things are just so slow. Like somebody mentioned More, at least that has the Nile song, right? It has something with some, but this whole record is just a snooze fest to me, right? And I know Anthony likes his super slow tempo, weepy Gilmore stuff. I'm not hitting it, just saying it's a bit too much of that for me. So I'm not going to add to the things that people have said because you've picked on the right songs. But if I had to summarize it, I would say that the emblematic song for this record is "What's the Deal?" Because that's how I feel when I hear it. Like, what the hell's the deal with this? I don't understand it. And it's such a big difference too from where they went, right?
Huge.
All of a sudden, everything was hyper-focused. The music was brilliant. There was a message. There was a mission. There was everything, right? But this is just a bunch of guys who are high. Sounds like to me. And I again, I'm not hating on them being high. That's not the point. The point is, it just rambles. It noodles. It doesn't. I don't connect with it in any way. I have my LP upstairs.
You know, Luis, who even knows that these guys were in the room at the same time?
I don't know anything about this record was made. I would imagine they were, only because, I mean, a lot of the songs have co-credits. So if nothing else, they were writing them together.
True.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a strange feel for that band. And as a soundtrack, I think Anthony mentioned More. I think that works better, actually. This is a little bit I mean, can you imagine what the movie was like if this was a soundtrack? Yeah,
It's interesting. Yeah, you're right. They basically co-wrote everything. Was you know, and Waters co-wrote every single song on here.
Absolutely, Curtains is written by all four of them. So
Yep.
that tells me they were all together jamming, and so was When You're In.
When You're In, yep.
So I mean, I grew up as a gigantic Floyd fan, but for me, it really all fell into place when I heard Echoes. That's when the Floyd that I loved began. And and it never really stopped until after the final cut. So I really enjoy it, but it's not a great Floyd record. That's the problem, right? It says Pink Floyd on the cover. Like if it said some other thing, I would be a lot less critical of it. But I can't help but compare it to the body of work. Now, if I don't do that, if I just imagine this is a single thing, then I would think this is a noodly psychedelic album from the era with no great glory or shame, and that's all I would say about it, right? I guess it just annoys me because it says Pink Floyd. But I would have to admit that I kind of feel the same way about Atom Heart Mother too, which I know a lot of people, like the old timers, really love. I don't particularly hear the love, but this is me. It was a good pick, Anthony, because I hadn't heard this record in a long time, and I threw it back on, and it was exactly like a couple of seconds into it, it all came back. So there's something to be said about that, right? It's not forgettable, it's not trash, but it is just not for me, not a good Pink Floyd album. That's what I would say.
Pete, does it get a lot of listens in your household, or is it something you haven't pulled in a long time?
No, I listened to it not that long ago. Like this album, Atom Heart Mother, Saucer Full of Secrets, Piper. I play those infrequently, but I like elements of all of them. They're obviously not the best Pink Floyd albums, but yeah, no, I listened to this not that long ago. So that's why when you pick this, I'm like, oh wow, that's the second time I've revisited this in not that far off. So I like it. There's good stuff on here.
Yeah, I don't understand a lot of people don't like Atom Heart Mother. I like Atom Heart
Oh, I love How to Mark Mother.
Mother.
I
I really
I got to
like
be in the mood for it. It's the weird album.
Yes.
But I got to be in the mood for it.
that you got that Alan Psychedelic Breakfast, which is kind of but
I think the suite's fantastic.
the suite, yeah, I think it's orchestrated, so it's they were attempting something a little different. They were reaching for something higher, and on a certain level, I think they succeeded. But I understand a lot of people don't like that.
And then of course it has the typical mellow Gilmore tune, Fat Old Son, and
Yeah, which that was a great song.
and Summer 67 or something. We Rick Wright, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But
Live
those are your jams, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is the Floyd that makes you happy. If you like the more cerebral stuff they did, I think that Atom Heart Mother was a really, I know we're not talking about the record, but since it was brought up, that is a much more creatively ambitious.
Yeah, it was very ambitious.
Very daring. Yeah.
And
That's a good
this
way to
record
put
is
it.
pretty much to me, it feels like it got phoned in at the last minute. Somebody made a decision, they put it together and released it. Because it out of all the records that I have of Floyd, this is the one that to me feels more like creamed corn. It doesn't have an awful lot of backbone to it. It's just very fluffy. So it's strange. I mean, I feel silly, criticizing Pink Floyd because they've done some of the best records ever, but this is just not an example to me. So, and it's also a credit to the record labels at the time that they allowed these bands to keep releasing records like this, developing and getting better and better. Because had they not had that ability, there may have never been a Dark Side of the Moon, So that is also a good thing. I mean, these guys were working on something. They were growing. Not everybody can come out of the park like Black Sabbath, right? So, I mean, some people need time, right? And Floyd clearly needed time after they lost Syd Barrett. So in that regard, I think it serves a useful purpose, and you can hear some of the seeds of the sounds that are going to become hallmark sounds later in this record, but they're not fully realized, right?
If they took this,
I guess that's why that none of the songs were ever played live until like What's the Deal was actually Gilmore started playing that live on his On an Island tour. And it's on the Remember the Dance. It's on that DVD.
Well, that's not true.
And then
They played
Nick
Obscured by
Mason's
Cloud and When
Festivals.
You're In 72 together as one track.
And
for a short
then
period
when
of
Nick
time.
Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets, they started to play a couple of those first two tracks off Obscured by Clouds, which was pretty cool. But God, that was the loudest concert I've ever seen. It was so loud.
Maybe they've been given time in the studio. These tracks would have developed into something.
Yeah, I think that's true. This is why I'm saying, to me, it feels like a demo. You know, when you're in a band and somebody brings an idea for what may eventually become a song, and then the finished product is never really quite like the demo, unless you're Pete Townsend, in which case it's basically the finished song in every way. I think this is like that. To me, this is what I hear from this. Is like somebody had a seed of an idea for a jam, and then they just sort of played to it. They didn't think of it too much.
Well, as it was mentioned, they took a break from a tour and working on the material for Dark Side to do this. It almost feels to me that they wanted to keep all that Dark Side ideas, the stuff that they were excited about, sort of off to the side and go back and just do this because they got hired by the movie company, a guy that worked with before. So they didn't use their newest and greatest tricks. They did a soundtrack. They sort of, for lack of a better word, half-ass songs. That really, they're not super soundtracky, you know, as on average, and they're not fully formed songs for some of them. I mean, even the instrumentals, When You're In, is 2.5 minutes long. About a minute of that is a fade out.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
If the whole album was instrumental, maybe it would have been better. Not that there are bad vocals on here. It's just, you know, as a soundtrack.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of these songs probably would have sounded kind of odd over the movie that it was created for. And it was called what, The Valley?
La Vallée.
La Vallée.
And it was like looking for this hidden valley, and they were looking for paradise or whatever. Some of these songs would kind of be weird over that. Maybe the instrumentals be okay.
And you know what, Chad? Your point kind of makes sense. Like they were working. I mean, they were working on Dark Side of the Moon, right?
Right.
And maybe they're like, well, we're not giving them that.
Right.
We've got 5 days to record. We go in the studio and we throw it, because that's exactly what I heard. Was a lot of this was like, hey, I got a great chord progression. Let's play over it. And they're jamming in the studio. Because a lot of these songs, not a lot, but there's probably 4 or 5 of them that there's no change in the song other than either Wright is playing over the top or Gilmore's playing over the top.
Yeah.
So, song doesn't really change.
Anthony, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned the fact that one of your this is a link to another one of your favorites. The credited in the movie is Maquette Garaudy, who co-formed System 7 with Steve Hillage.
Oh, I didn't know that.
All right. And there she is. Can you see that?
Oh,
That's
Maquette. She's credited on Obscured by Clouds?
Yep. She's an actress in it. No, in the movie.
Oh, she's in the movie. See, that's something I never knew.
Yeah. So she formed
nobody ever saw the movie.
Hillage, and then they also played at Nearfest together, both as the Hillage band and in the Gong Show. Sorry, not the Gong Show, but Gong's performance.
Well, she was in, she was in Gong with Hillage.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, that's cool. I never knew that.
But I mean, as far as an album for me, if it didn't have Pink Floyd, if it wasn't a Pink Floyd album, I wouldn't own it. It's a pleasant enough listen. Like Ken said, nothing really grabs me. I do agree that Childhood's End is probably the best song on it. You know, it's fine. You know, and fine's not going to get me to put it on very often. It's a nice remembrance of what that gap is between metal and where we thought they were going, and Dark Side of the Moon, which is where they were really going. And this is sort of like a timeout. This is like a break. You know, they're like Eric said, we're not giving them this cool new stuff we're working on. We're gonna go jam and just give them some songs.
You know, you could hear a musical continuity from metal to Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah,
this just doesn't fit. It's like you know what I mean. This is really like the outlier.
The only continuity I hear is that drum at the beginning of Childhood's End ends up at the beginning of Time. That's it.
Yeah. That's right.
He probably said, "Hey Rick, you got any ideas? We got this movie we got to do. Hey Nick, what do you got working on? Nothing? Oh, all right.
We'll figure it out, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Why?
All right, well,
I am
I
glad
think
you
we
picked
have-
this record because
I think we've
hadn't
heard
played
from
it.
the panel of Obscured
What-
by Clouds. I think we
What,
have
what else you got?
uh,
What else you got?
2 for yays and about 4 for nay, pretty much, right, Pete?
I guess so. I guess so.
I think it's more
Lewis,
like
Lewis was saying something though before. Lewis,
I-
finish your thought.
I was just gonna say I am also happy you picked it because I hadn't heard it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I do want to give some props to the record because I remembered every song on it as soon as I started listening to it. Like the whole sequence of it came into my head, right? So yes, it has that Floydian earworm kind of mood setting factor. It does. It's just that I hadn't heard it in so long that whereas in the past I would never question it because it was Pink Floyd, but inside I just wasn't that happy with it. Now in my middle age or past my middle age, I'm thinking, this kind of sucks. but it still has that, there's a part of my life where that was when I first got it. That's all I played for weeks, right? Because it was Pink Floyd, so I had to hear it. But yeah, it was a strange choice because I don't even think it's Gilmour's finest hour at all. Of that little intermission era of the band, I think Metal is a much better representation of what the guy was going to be able to do. This is kind of even the fuzz sounds that he uses are not fully formed.
They're not dialed in, right?
Yeah, they're
A little too fuzzy or
sounds like-
something at times.
I do like
I
his,
feel like some of the tricks that he started to bring into the fold on Metal, he used a little bit here and there. Like the title track starts off, that's a lot of slide guitar. What did he start off
slide
Metal
and
with?
pedal steel guitar?
Slide
That's it.
guitar.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it could be the approach. I mean, if they got that phone call and everyone said, yeah, let's do it. And again, not wanting to use some of the material they had. I mean, and you're looking at it in terms of, does a soundtrack really fit into a band's discography? It's you're doing something different, right? I mean, I have to think at some point they're watching clips or sections of that movie to try to figure out what might go with this scene or that scene. I don't know how the music was used because I never saw the movie, but it's a different approach than saying we're doing because you're right. I mean, at least my opinion is you've got Metal, you've got Obscured, and then you go here with Dark Side of the Moon. So something's different in that approach to this, to doing a soundtrack versus here's our next studio record.
Well, here's a question for everybody. So let's say this soundtrack, this never happens, right? What happens if either on Dark Side or Wish You Were Here or whatever, a better produced, more conceptually realized Childhood's End or Obscured by Clouds is on one of those albums, more fully baked? Do those become classic compositions in the Pink Floyd canon, possibly?
I would say maybe. I think the two instrumentals that started Obscured by Clouds and When You're In, I think that could have ended up on something, maybe Wish You Were Here, or developed into something on Animals.
Yep.
But Childhood's End, I don't know. I think that just may end up remaining one of the better tracks from the early era. I don't know if it fits otherwise after Dark Side.
Or that one always sits in my head as a Gilmour solo album.
Yeah.
If that's where I would see that more than a Floyd record, I think.
That's a good point.
But I like that song.
Yeah.
It feels more Gilmour than Floyd.
by the time they got into the studio, really worked on these tracks, they probably wouldn't even resemble anything that you heard on this album.
Yeah, you might be
That's
right.
my feeling. Yeah. I to answer Pete's question, I don't think that, I mean, they had a concept in mind for Dark Side of the Moon when they started working on it. So that everything was about that concept, about death, right? This stuff was parallel to it. So that belonged to the old sort of nebulous, let's see what happens era of the band. And after they struck gold with Dark Side of the Moon, and there was a structure to their method after that. There was no room for noodleage. Everything had to be part of a larger story. So I don't think they would have had any reason to mind those songs and do anything with them. If anything, they may have brought them in. If they had worked on them on rehearsals during tour, maybe they would have done something interesting with a couple of pieces to connect other songs or transition from one segment of an album to another segment of another album. But I don't think they would have entered anything, especially not Animals. By that point, everything was like super, uncomfortably structured, right, for the other guys. So I don't think it would have happened. But I think I do wish that these, because they do promise more than they deliver some of these songs, and that is the only thing that I will say. As I listen to it quite a bit. I've been listening to it every night, and my ride back from the studio to here, just to make sure that I keep getting the same feeling. Like, I wish they had done something different. I wish they had actually written a song. I wish they had done something, which I didn't realize the timing. Of course, they weren't going to do any of these things. If they're working on the other record, what's the impetus? Nothing, right? So that explains it. I didn't know that. Of course, I thought this was earlier. I thought they were just like in between tours or whatever. They got an offer. They decided to put it together. But, wherever they were recording, they were having too much fun. And this was the end result. This is what I thought. I never realized that they were simultaneously working on Dark Side and this, which would be, there's no way, right? No way.
If they would have brought this to a producer, he would have said, "What else you got?"
I have to think so. I do. It's just not that good.
Anthony, what do
if
you?
this were supposed to be the true follow-up to Metal, and this is what they presented, you're right. A producer would have said, "Where's the adventurous stuff? What happened?"
Anthony, what do you like about this album?
I don't know. I like the vibe. I like the early I like all eras of Floyd except for maybe the final cut. I think Stay's a beautiful tune. For years I've always loved the mellowness and the dreaminess of Burning Bridges. I think Childhood End is fantastic. I don't know. Last time I heard, it was snowing out one day and it just clicked. It was like, I don't know if it clicked with the vibe or whatever, but it just clicked. And I just love the vibe of the record. I love the instrumentation. I think Stay, I love some Rick Wright's vocals, and Stay is one of my favorites by him. It kind of reminds me of like Paintbox a little bit, just a great Wright vocal. And I do love the vocal harmonies of Gilmour and Wright on Burning Bridges. I think that's just beautiful. It's just always been one of those records. I just love the vibe. It's always been a perfect vibe for me.
Wright and Gilmour always sounded great together. Absolutely.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of a unique Pink Floyd album because you don't hear Waters much at all, right? It's like, because a lot of the albums that come afterwards, he's got such a big, presence on those albums. And this, to me, he's there. Obviously, he co-wrote most of these songs, but it doesn't sound like a album where he has that big of an influence on.
Yeah, Free 4 is really the only track where you can tell he wrote the lyrics, and obviously he's singing it, but they have a much different tone than a lot of the rest of the album. It's dark and sarcastic, and for some reason the music's uplifting and happy. So it's sort of an odd track.
Yeah.
Maybe, and that's another reason maybe I like the rock, because it's a raw record. it's not well produced. It's just very raw, and Gilmour's Strat is just on fire on that record. I just think it's so good.
Where the songs never develop.
That's
nice
your
guitar.
opinion, and you're mostly wrong most of the time. So I just let you know.
I don't think so. But
I do.
I think my batting average is pretty high. But
whatever.
there's some nice guitar that lasts like 30 seconds.
But to defend Anthony's point, I think that what I am doing for sure, and maybe what you're doing, Ken, is you're actually listening to it and dissecting it, right?
I'm listening to it like it's a real Pink Floyd album.
Yeah. And what Anthony has said, which I think is fair, is that for him, this is a mood setter. And normally, if you try to dissect a mood setter, the mood is broken. It's like trying to explain a joke. So in a way, I can understand that. If that is the reason you like this record, the mood is undeniable. It just so happens to be that we're all different. For me, that mood works best if I'm really, really stoned and I have nothing to do.
Luis, I got
If
an old
I have
log.
any
That's
kind
a
of-
mood setter also.
Yeah, I mean, but it's for me, I'm just saying the mood that the record creates is one of extraordinarily lackadaisical chill. That's what it is, right? Even the rockers, as we've just noticed, and not just noticed, but as we've been saying, the sounds are not properly dialed in. The organs are not properly dialed in. The pedals and the guitars are properly dialed in. That it may be the most forgettable bass tone ever on a Floyd record.
When you can hear
And
it.
I wouldn't be some of those toms are not exactly in tune. And it doesn't matter, right? It's like you're listening in on a rehearsal. That's what it feels like to me. It's a demo / rehearsal. It's an unfinished thing. You just got a snapshot of Floyd doing what they did when they thought nobody was looking.
That's a good way to put it.
And if you like that, then you're gonna love it. Yeah.
What do you think, Anthony?
Not
I thought it was a good album for discussion.
But,
I mean,
you
it's an album
know,
that's not
you have
talked
to
about
work
a lot.
through
I mean,
it, right?
it's like,
Was.
as you know, Pete, you and I have listened to it, but you know, the other
it's a
four
great album for discussion.
haven't listened to it in years. I mean, as
Oh.
Luis said, he hasn't listened to it, and he said, "Well, this kind of reminds me of what I felt when I listened to it before." And Ken, he hasn't listened to it since, you know, he bought it in 1972, probably.
Wasn't that long ago, but
That's a good point, Anthony, because same thing. I pulled it off the shelf. I can't tell you the last time I played this. Ages.
I'm like, I really like Pink Floyd. I own, I think, 4 different versions of Dark Side of the Moon. You know, I mean, I own 3 copies of Metal. I own 2 different versions of Atom Heart Mother. I mean, you know, it's like, I'm really crazy. I got 1 of these. I don't need any more of this.
Is that the Harvest label, Ken?
Yeah, this is British. This is original British. So,
Okay.
But
How many copies do you have, Anthony?
I only have it on CD, actually, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
No cassette, huh?
I may have had it.
Not
I probably
yet,
had a
anyway.
cassette in the 80s. But
Oh man, cool. Well, there you have it, everybody. An album study of Obscured by Clouds. You know how it goes. Everybody watching, if you're familiar with this album, let us know what you think of the album. Give us your little dissertation on it. If you've never listened to Obscured by Clouds, go check it out wherever you listen to your music, and then come back and report and let us know what you think. And we thank everybody for participating in this latest album study. Our next crew member who will be picking an album for all of us to do another study on is Mr. Eric Porter. So Eric has the we've gone full circle now, so we're back to the beginning. So Eric will be thinking about an album for the rest of us to go and listen and talk about on our next episode. And till then, Louis, you want to give us any kind of what's going on with the album? And you've been busy down there in Mexico.
Yeah. I'm here in Mexico City with Luz Riada, with Ramses Luna and Edgar at the studio. We entered the studio after we did some gigs with 13 songs, which is much more than you need for one album, but we thought we might as well do an album and have a seed for the next one. And as it normally happens, when you're in the studio and you have equipment and everything is plugged in, then you start writing also, which has been a bit of a distraction. We wrote 2 more songs. So we have essentially in the can 5 songs And today we're gonna start laying down drums for another 2. And we're just gonna be jamming to make sure that everything is as it should be. So this record will be out. I mean, we already have shows booked in December for the presentation of the album, so it better be out before then. But it's coming along great. For people who are not familiar with Luz Arriada, it's instrumental. Ramses is somebody that played Near Fest with Cabezas de Seda all those years ago, and he's a very good personal friend. He plays with me in a Devil's Stick. He's a great Cabezas de Seda. So I've been playing with him in this band since 2016, and this is going to be a different record, but it's going to be a pretty good one. I can't play you clips from it because they would kill me, but there are some really good moments.
Cool. Well, we look forward to hearing it.
And I can also say that one of the songs, and another song is Matthias Olsson. So it's gonna. We have 2 more concerts to do. That I was late. I keep forgetting that the time in Mexico is different from the time in the States. So, and I was rehearsing, so I'm sorry, but
Okay. We're glad you joined, and we look forward to hearing the new music.
Thanks, man. I will be sure to get everybody some music as soon as it's ready.
Cool. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, everybody. So we will announce Eric's pick for us for the next album study sometime over the next week or so. So till then, visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together. All the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Coming up here on the channel, of course, you know, Wednesday is new album review day, so stay tuned for that. Also Friday, we've got Friday Morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. We've got the Professor's Picks with Mr. Ken Golden. We've got the UK Connection coming up this weekend, ranking the albums, all sorts of stuff. So thanks for watching, everybody. For Louis Nasser, Chad Hutchinson, Ken Golden, Anthony Ferrara, and Eric Porter, I am P. Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time here on In the Prog Seat. Take care.
Awesome.